Real TV program Reality Check with Mustafa Hassan. Today, we are going to be talking about the world economy and the challenges it faces going forward, what we have faced in the past, and some of the growing economies in the world. Having said that, you cannot mention the future economy without talking about China, and that is going to be our focus today. If you look at it, they have taken a lot of initiatives for the future 40, 50, 60-year plans to get the world together, working together. And they will be investing about 8 to 10 trillion dollars in the next 20 years, connecting the world, which we'll go into the details a little bit later as well. But before we do that, what I would like to do is introduce our guest today, Ms. Zoya Javed. She's an educationist and has studied China's history as well. So welcome, Ms. Zoya.
Thank you so much.
What I would like to start with is, can you give us a little bit of Chinese economy history and how it came to grow into the second biggest economy in the world?
Yes, sure. Thank you for inviting me, sir. Since the China was founded in 1949 and has experienced a turbulent and surprising growth, from the agrarian country to the largest powerhouse of the country and now the backbone of the society and world economy, obviously. It has experienced a revolution, socialism, Maoism, and finally gradual economic reforms and fast economic growth that has characterized post-Maoist period. Other than the period of great leap forward and the chaos of the Cultural Revolution negatively impacted the Chinese economy. However, since the period of economy reforms in 1978, China has been major improvements and average living standards and has experienced relative social stability long way.
So you mentioned the year 1978. Can you give us the historic significance of a new policy that China implemented in that year? Can you mention that period to us, please?
Yes, definitely. In 1979, it was a bit later than 78. They have introduced the policy of having one child. Due to the large population in China, they have introduced this policy.
So to that point, so they introduced the policy in 1979 is what they're saying.
Yes.
And I understand from talking to you earlier that they were almost crossing 1 billion people. Is that right?
Yes. After the death of their premier, they already have been crossing 1 billion population. So they have implemented this theory to their country. And at that time, they have one child policy. Right. After a decade long, 2 child modified beginning in the rural areas, especially in the rural areas. They have said that if they have first daughter, then they can have another child. And for other ethnic groups, they have also allowed 2 child policy, which linger on for 30 to 36 years. Till 2015, December 22, they have this policy remained.
Okay, so it remained there for 36 years is what you're saying. Okay, that's really good to know. So there is a significance to that year that Ms. Zoya just mentioned, 2015, the One Child policies, because China initiated its One Belt, One Road project, its formation in 2013 by the premier. And it was originally called basically to connect with countries across the world to build railway systems, your infrastructure systems, your sea routes, just like CPEC in Pakistan, but that's not where they started. Right now, China is working with Asia, Africa, Europe, Middle East, and the Americas. They have presence everywhere at this point, and that was announced by the premier at that point, Xi Jinping. It was first called the Silk Road Economic Belt Project, which was a road initiative only, going from China, the westernized China to westernized Russia, to Poland, Belarus, and further. After that, they started what they call the 21st century maritime Silk Road, which was to focus on the oceans, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, for the Eurasian countries. So, and then they, at that point, they renamed it One Belt, One Policy instead of calling it Land and Sea separately. And it's funny that you mentioned that they became the People's Republic of China in 1949 because the completion date of this project coincides with the 100th year anniversary of them being a People's Republic of China. So the completion date for this project is 2049. So it's rather interesting they have planned it that way. So from there onwards, I would like to ask you, let me just go through some of the corridors that they have started.
Okay.
So they started the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor. Then they went on to do the infrastructure for 60 countries right now. China is operating infrastructure in 60 countries, which is 31%. Like, let that sink in. 31% of world's countries are now China has a presence in them right now. This is huge, it's massive in just 6 years of achievement. Then they have the Euro-Asian land bridge that will run from the Western China to Western Russia, Belarus to Poland to Germany and Hamburg. And that train, the first one arrived in 2018. So that is already in the marks. In 2016, the first train from China arrived in Tehran. So they've already built that section of it also. CPEC is completed. They are building, it's very interesting to find out that Russia and China that did not really get along so well a few decades ago have become really good friends to a point where Russia has allowed Chinese shipping companies to research oil and energy resources in the Arctic Circle, which comes under the Russian land. And China has already sent a few ships over there exploring oil resources. So from there, I'm going to take a short break. If you have any questions for me at this point.
Yes, sir. Surely I have one for you. Can you elaborate China's effect on African economy?
That's a very interesting and a great question. Africa was one of the first, it's one of the most rural places, continents in the world, most underdeveloped continents in the world. Nigeria is the most populous one in Africa, and China has made a promise to the Nigerian government to supply 20,000 satellite TVs, one for every home for 20,000 families in the next 10 years, or hopefully before that within the next 5 years. So that's a really big one. There is a very little country it's in the heart of the project, is at the Horn of Africa, and that's called Djibouti. It's connected Ethiopia to Djibouti. It used to take 3 days to transport something from Djibouti to Ethiopia, which now just takes 12 hours. Now imagine the impact. If you look at Ethiopia, there are about 56 Chinese manufacturing companies just in Ethiopia. They're doing a solar project in Nigeria. They're doing a nuclear project in Sudan. They have a massive presence in the oil industry over there, and which also includes buyback. So China has already paid Sudan money for oil. They're going to be extracting from Sudan. So they already own all of that oil pretty much at this point. It will be very interesting to know that in 2000, China had oil presence in 2 countries in Africa. In 2009, there are 20 countries that China has an oil presence in. So Africa is definitely the heart of where they wanted to go to, and they have certainly accomplished that. So
very amazing facts, sir.
It's only good. One thing I would like to mention is I think you had some questions about the GDP between US and China.
Yes, well, I wanted to know, if China is growing so well and so rapidly, so why the economy is the world's second economy?
So it basically comes down to China. I believe economy was about 25.1 or 25.3 trillion, and US was 22 point something, if I'm not mistaken with the numbers. But the GDP is the growth domestic product, is what defines the value of the country. So the median income in US is way over the median income for a family in China, because of being 1.3 billion people. their average household income is $18,000, while in America, median family income is $62,000. And they're also a lot less population as well. So that's why there's a GDP difference over there as well. The smart thing that they're trying to do is they are focusing now on building a super grid. So let me talk about the super grid. It encompasses China, South Korea, Mongolia, Russia, and Japan. All these countries have their own electrical grids, and they're combining that to build a super grid. To even in some small countries in Africa, they can provide 10 gigawatts to run pretty much a small country after this project is being completed. And there are maps that show that you'll be seeing on this show as well to validate that point. So they have done reasonably well. So there is nothing that China is not focusing on. China, compared to USA, China owns $1 trillion. Just think about that number. China owns $1 trillion of US bonds and assets in the US. And of course, they are not going to pull that money out because they know the significance of Chinese products in America. So they can't really go down that path, but they can totally, definitely compete with USA and bring that economy a lot down as well if they wanted to. But their focus now is long-term, 30, 40 years from now. And they're certainly on the route to doing that. And they have given some really, really good incentives to some really poor countries. To basically, Africa is being run by China right now. That's the reality. If you look at it, Panama was the first one in the Americas to sign an agreement with them. Then came Bolivia. Then some other ones also. Their revenue is $1.1 billion by doing this trade route. $1.1 billion. $3 trillion of actual goods being transported. Now, those numbers are insane. No wonder China has become so quickly the second biggest economy in the world, and it's not going to stop. It's going to increase, and they have definitely put in place. There is a term, economic hitman, where you give loans to countries and you basically own those projects for a long time to keep generating revenue, and which is what China has done, and they're absolutely right to do that. But they are focusing in a very right way to do it. They are focusing in a very, very good way to do it by building those trust and relationships, not by forcing those governments to take loans like some other big powers have done in the past. So I think that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Is how, and thanks for being guest for me and asking so many good questions. So this was more of an economic topic for me, and there are definitely more to follow because the world is increasing at a rapid pace. We are lacking agriculture. I'll give my closing comments. We are lacking agriculture. We are lacking human resources. We have more and more technology now. The manual labor force is decreasing. People are not catching up with new technologies. There's a lot to be learned over there. And global warming, there are still some spectacles about that global warming is not happening, which is unbelievable. But let's put it this way. In the southern Indian Ocean, Mauritius will be underwater by 2040. There will be no island over there. So those are some of the facts that we need to focus on. And this is our youth. Us are the ones who have to take the initiative, have to lead into this, and have to make sure that we leave a better generation for our children and not just destroy this world and have them suffer through this. So on those comments, I will end the show today. This is Reality Check with Mustafa Ihsan for Real TV, and more to come soon. Thank you, guys.